Hello, beautiful souls. How y'all doing? I hope you're well. Today, we're going to talk about a question that most of us have asked at least once in our lives. I know I have. Is my picker broken? Maybe you phrased the question differently. Maybe you said something like, why do I keep attracting the same type of person? Especially after you swore off dating musicians, only to find yourself falling for another guitar-wielding charmer, right? Or maybe you're like me and you are drawn to the strong, emotionally unavailable type that keeps showing up on repeat in your life. Maybe the question for you sounds like, why am I attracted to people who are wrong for me, right? You know they're no good, even before the first date, but the pull is so strong. The pull is so strong that it's like your brain and your heart are in a tug of war all the time. Another one I hear all the time is, why can't I feel attracted to the good ones? Hmm? Maybe you met someone that was kind, stable, and 100% available. They ticked all the boxes, but there was no spark. The spark was nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, even after years apart, you still feel that butterfly flutter in your stomach whenever you think about your ex. The one who was about as reliable as a politician's promise. I get it. I get it. That whole good ones versus bad ones is a fight you'll never win. More on that on another episode. But if you're nodding and listening to this and thinking, that's me, I want you to take a deep breath. You feel that? That's the weight of self-doubt lifting because I'm going to shift your perspective a little bit. That's the intention for this episode because relationships are not about finding the perfect person. They're also not about avoiding pain or guaranteeing a happily ever after. Relationships are our greatest teachers. They are our most profound catalyst for healing and growth. So that broken picker, it's actually like a really sophisticated GPS system that is always guiding you toward whatever experience will facilitate the most profound growth for you. It's true. I mean, think about it. Every relationship that you've had, even the ones that ended in heartbreak or frustration, every single one, if you really look at it, it was probably accompanied by some kind of growth spurt. Everything is always leading you to somewhere important toward a deeper understanding of yourself. I mean, what about that partner who always had a backhanded compliment? Like one of those people that would say something like, you look nice today for a change, right? Like, have you ever met someone like that? And as painful as that is, like if you've had that experience, it hurts to think that someone that says they care about you would be passive aggressive in that way, right? But even in that experience, they showed you that you deserve someone who lifts you up. You deserve someone who is going to encourage you, not tear you down. So those kind of relationships are like a crash course in whatever you need to see, wherever you need to grow. I remember a few times, a few times I have been involved with people who were just too busy. You know, the kind of person that would just always kind of keep it casual, one foot in, one foot out. And they weren't wasting my time, although I didn't believe that at the time. They weren't wasting my time, but at the time, I thought they were. But what they really taught me, what they really taught me was that I wanted to be with the kind of person who wanted to build with me. I wanted to be with someone who saw spending time with me as valuable, right? So we learn so much through contrast. I would almost say that we learn most of the time through contrast. Let me just tell you a story about the littlest soul. It's a parable. I'd love to give someone credit, but I don't know who said it, but it's brilliant. So the littlest soul says to God, "Why do I have to be in the dark?" And so God turns all the lights on, the sun, the stars, everything. And then the littlest soul could no longer see himself, right? So we learn through contrast. We learn what we like by experiencing what we don't like. We know what pleasure feels like because we know what pain feels like. So I know it's when it comes to matters of the heart, that just doesn't feel good. That just doesn't feel good. And then, of course, there is timing, right? Sometimes you meet the right person at what appears to be the wrong time. It doesn't mean that your picker is broken. It just means that, you're not in a space of alignment yet. Or maybe you meet someone that seems so amazing, but you weren't over your last relationship, and so you couldn't show up fully in that connection. Or maybe you were connected to somebody who was fantastic. I mean, I've had this experience too, where they just seemed so right, but we were just headed in different directions, right? And it's not that the timing was off, even though that's the story we like to tell ourselves, but all timing is divine. All timing is divine. So if it showed up, however it showed up, even if it looked like misalignment, it was still divine timing. If relationships are supposed to help us to heal and grow, why do they hurt so damn much sometimes? Like, that's the question. And there's a simple answer. There's a simple answer to that question. But I promise you, it is not going to satisfy you. But here it goes. The reason that relationships are painful sometimes is because growth isn't comfortable. And relationships, the purpose of relationships is healing and growth. And healing and growth are both uncomfortable. It's one of those things that it often feels worse before it feels better. Like when you're in physical therapy after an injury, at first it's tough, it's painful, and you have to kind of power through the discomfort. And in the end, when it's all said and done, it helps you to rebuild, it makes you stronger. I know that's of no comfort all the time, but it's the truth. So let's break this down a little bit further. Let's break it all the way down. We have been sold this bill of goods that says that relationships are supposed to make us happy. But what if, like I'm saying, what if that's not the point? Relationships are not like vending machines where you just go and put in a quarter. Well, you can't get nothing for a quarter anymore, but you go and put in a credit card and happiness pops out. That is not how relationships are built. That is not how they work. And so they don't dispense, joy on demand. Instead, relationships are more like a component to co-creation of a life where happiness can flourish. So it's not where you go and buy happiness, but it is an ingredient in the compost to help you grow happiness, right? Relationships are, I won't even say relationships are complicated. People are complicated. We are all complicated. And so we have a tendency to complicate things. But in its simplest forms, relationships are for healing and growing. And this is why shifting your perspective about this. I know I said that we were talking about pickers, and we are talking about pickers because sometimes the relationships that we end up in are painful, and we kind of fight against that because we think that we're supposed to be experiencing this happiness. We think that our partners are a source of happiness and that we're just supposed to experience glee, right? And even when there's discomfort, the discomfort should be really short-lived. Like in rom-coms, in 90 minutes, they go from bliss to some seemingly insurmountable obstacle to overcoming the obstacle together and living happily ever after. That is what we call romantic beats, ladies and gentlemen. But in real life, 90 minutes is not enough to solve most relationship problems. Well, that's not necessarily true. You could, but again, we humans are a complicated lot, and so it almost never happens. But when we expect another person or even a relational container to be the source of our happiness, we inadvertently set ourselves up for disappointment. And that's just simply because no one can fulfill all of our needs, and no one else can be fully responsible for our emotional state. That's just too heavy a burden for any relationship or person to bear in the first place. Again, relationships provide a foundation. They offer support, they offer a challenge, because growth, they offer us companionship, and they create a space for us to pursue our passions, to face our fears, and to become more of ourselves. And they are just like these fertilizers for our growth. And we are also that for other people, right? We are also that for other people. So if we can like tweak our perspective around this, then we open ourselves up to for more possibilities, like more possibilities and opportunities to experience happiness and to create memories and to become more of ourselves and to know ourselves on a deeper level. So, like, a supportive partner doesn't make you happy by giving you everything you want, although that's nice sometimes, right? But they also encourage you to go after your dreams even when it's scary, right? Because if all they do is tell you everything you want to hear, well, while that might feel good sometimes, it's not the most helpful thing. And a challenging relationship isn't going to be constant bliss, even in the healthiest. I'm reluctant to say happiest because, as I've said before, happiness is sometimes subject to change just because of the weather, right? But even in the healthiest relationships, they aren't blissful all the time. Stuff happens, triggers happen, we repeat cycles, we get content, which can often lead to complacency. Like, it's a whole thing. So it's like Terry Real says, relationships are this cycle of harmony, disharmony, and repair. And in layman's terms, that means growth. That means relationships are about growing. Just as intimacy isn't about feeling good all the time, because in order to be intimate, you have to be vulnerable. And vulnerability can bring up our shit, right? It sometimes opens old wounds and all these things. So things that make us whole don't always feel good. And that includes relationships. But when we shift our perspective, like I'm suggesting, right? Suddenly, what looks like a problem in a relationship looks different, right? So, like, that argument is an opportunity and a chance to understand each other better. And those differences that might drive you a whole lot of crazy, they're opportunities to expand your worldview. And that doesn't mean that we should settle for unhealthy relational dynamics. So instead of focusing on who you're picking, maybe we should be talking about how you're showing up. And I'm not about to launch into some, it's not them, it's you bullshit. That's not what I'm saying. This isn't about blame. I'm talking about power. When we shift our focus on how we show up, we reclaim our agency. So here's a few things to ponder. How often do you pause to reflect on your role in your relationships, past or present? And I'm not just talking about the good stuff, right? Not the parts you liked, not the ways that you showed up and did all the things for the other person, but like the messy stuff too, like the way you communicate when you're hurt or the expectations that you bring to the table. Maybe you built some walls to protect yourself. These are not random things. These are the kinds of things that have shaped every relationship you've ever had, romantic or otherwise. That argument that you had with your ex 3 years ago, it may still be influencing how you communicate today. Think about that, right? The way that your parents showed up or didn't show up, the ways that they expressed affection or didn't express affection, that's in the mix too. All of these past things are influencing how you relationship, right? And sometimes, if we're keeping it all the way real, sometimes we keep picking the same people so that we can keep being the same person. Hmm? Hmm? Our past experiences are not just like this baggage that we're lugging around. They're also the lens that we view every new connection through. And that's the reason that we often feel like we're picking the same person again and again, in addition to the fact that if we choose the same person, then we get to be the same person. And sometimes, as a result of that, we turn green flags into red flags. It's just like, oh, this person looks good on paper, but they bore me. you know, if you grew up in a household where love was conditional, you might unconsciously test every partner just to see if they'll stick around. So, like, the lens that we view things through can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's like, oh, yeah, of course. Of course you keep picking the same people. And this is the other part. The choosing the same people is not so you can punish yourself, even if it means you get to be the same person, right, in the container. Even if it means you get to be the same person. The other part is that in doing that, you also get another opportunity to heal that stuff, to make a different choice. So how do we do that? Like, how do we do that? How do we make a different choice, even if even if the person you're with bears striking resemblance to someone you've been with before? Like, how do you choose something different? Because sometimes choosing something different doesn't mean choosing someone different, right? We could dig in that. We'd be here all day. So how do we do that? We get curious. We dig deep. We ask ourselves uncomfortable questions like, how am I contributing to the dynamics in my relationships? What patterns do I see repeating across these different relationships? What beliefs do I hold about love and partnership? And where did they even come from? Are they even my own ideas? How might my past experiences be shaping what I'm seeking out of current or potential partners? Like that kind of curiosity, not judgment, curiosity. A quote from Esther Perel: "The constant changes that we go through, the liquid life that we live, demands that our relational skills be primarily able to change." So you see, by being curious, all you're doing is gathering data, because when we understand, we can choose differently. Maybe you realize that you keep every partner at an arm's length because you're afraid. But knowing that, having that kind of intel about yourself means that you could consciously choose to lean into vulnerability, even when you are, shaking in your boots. Or maybe you notice that you are quick to judgment about your partner if they seem distant. But with that awareness that you automatically assume the worst, that gives you the information you need to pause and take a breath and then approach the situation with openness rather than defensiveness, right? So that's the beautiful thing about data, is the more you know, the more options you have. And when you shift how you show up, you shift the entire dynamic. There's a Buddhist saying that says, when you change, everything in your environment changes, right? Another thing I want to remind you of, though, because we're talking about like patterns and stuff, patterns aren't prophecies. Patterns aren't prophecies. So I don't want you to think that just because you recognize a pattern means you're stuck in it. It doesn't mean that you can't change it. Like recognizing the pattern is what gives you the power to change it, right? So while experience is a great teacher, it's not a fortune teller. Like it tells you, it might tell you why you're doing something right now and why you did something before, but it cannot guarantee that you will do it again in the future. Does that make sense? You have the power. You hold the power to create the future you desire inside of you. And the things you observe, the things you notice, the strings that curiosity helps you connect, those will help you to shape the future that you want to experience. That could include a different partner. It could include a different relationship with your current partner, right? It doesn't mean that we need to, cast aside everybody that we're with or our current partners just because we find ourselves in repetitive patterns. Sometimes the shifting of the lens offers an opportunity to create a new relationship with the person you're already with. Like, that's what's up, right? So, long story short, when you change your lens, you change what's possible, period. And that is where the real magic happens. So I'll leave you with this. Love is evolution. Everything in your environment is constantly shifting and changing and growing. And so are you. I'm excited about what you're creating for yourself. I love you.